Hello and welcome to Get the Table, another wrestling roundtable discussion podcast with myself, Adam Wilbourn, one of the Dudley boys, Michael Sidgwick, and our very own Jamie Kennedy from Defiant Wrestling.
Where did that come from? I've just invaded. I'm sorry. I've invaded your workplace, and I feel terrible.
More than welcome. We are here, of course, to discuss another burning wrestling issue. But before we get into it, if you're a fan of this sort of thing, make sure you subscribe to WhatCulture Wrestling on either iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts from for daily wrestling podcasts where we review Raw, SmackDown, pay-per-views. We have interviews, more roundtable discussions like this one, and a roundup of the week, complete with a bloody good quiz, of course, on WrestleCulture. But gents, we are gathered here today.
Oh, don't, man.
I'm going to make it a thing. To talk all about WWE commentary. That's arguably one of the reasons why you're here. You're, of course, a commentator for Defiant Wrestling. And we want to talk about how WWE fixed the issue of their commentary, because this is something that's been an issue for quite some time now, and it's sort of reared its ugly head in the past few days, with Renee Young tweeting something along the lines of, "Oh, I wish people wouldn't tuck their ears into caps," and someone replying, "Well, I wish you didn't suck at commentary," basically. How bad is this issue, Michael Sidgwick?
Before we get into this, did you see the guy reply to Renee Young's outburst? He said something to the effect of, "Oh yeah, I'm really sorry about this. Tell John that he's really good." It's like, I'm sure she's going to go home and do that. All right, this total dickhead troll on Twitter was a complete dick to me. Oh, but he's got a message for you, John Moxley. Yeah. You're really good at wrestling. I'm pretty sure that was going to happen. Before the Mr. Jamie Kennedy gives you the inside perspective on commentary, I'll give you the outside perspective. It's absolutely rotten. It's so bad that I'm pretty sure no one even pays attention to it anymore. I completely tune it out because they've got nothing like insightful or funny or otherwise effective to say. It's constant exposition, sound bites that have been regurgitated over the course of about 4 or 5 years at this point. Big dog, boss time. It's asinine, banal, pointless, and when you do find yourself paying attention to it, you are invariably just so annoyed that you tune it straight back out.
I used to be of the opinion of it wouldn't be the same without commentary. You know, I was brought up in the right time in terms of, you know, JR, you know, the King, Michael Cole and Taz, who were a great duo over on SmackDown.
Yes, he was once not awful.
We'll get on to him, don't you worry. But I was, you know, that formed part of the experience for me. Whenever I think about classic moments, it is along with the commentary lines that went with it. And yet nowadays, as part of my job, I obviously have to watch almost every second of Raw and SmackDown, but I watch it on double speed, barely catch any of the commentary. Whenever we do a live stream, we obviously have to have the volume turned down so we don't get taken down off YouTube.
It's where all the golden banter has to flourish. You can't listen to the commentary,
So, but, you know, and I'm invariably not bothered whatsoever that I can barely catch the commentary. And then whenever I do go back and watch segments or moments that I want to really, you know, hone in on, it just completely draws me out at the moment that they're having these little weird arguments, these in-jokes, and like you say, these weird catchphrases that they're trying to get over. I think the latest one that really pisses me off that I've sort of caught up on is, who's going to join the raid, for the War Raiders or whatever they're called now, the Viking Raiders. It really, really winds me up. But we have Jamie Kennedy here, as I said, commentator for Defiant Wrestling. First of all, before we get into what it's like, what is your perspective of WWE's output?
I think they've got a really tough job. Because imagine being Renee Young, for example. You're already third wheeling on. Because I think Michael Cole and Corey Graves, as much as a lot of people crap all over them and don't like what they do, I think they do have a bit of... Because Corey Graves plays that kind of... Occasionally, maybe 40% of the time, he'll go Bobby Heenan. And then 60% of the time, he goes away from that and he's modern WWE.
Just shouts over people.
Yeah. Him and Michael Cole actually have some chemistry as far as I can see. I feel really sorry for Renee Young because she's been thrust into this third wheel position and then fed sound bites, which we were talking about this earlier. Sometimes she has to get them in even if it doesn't fit what's happening. I honestly think that is one of the toughest jobs.
And she is effectively representing female commentators in wrestling. And so if she does a poor job, people say, yeah, you just can't have female commentators, which is a bit of a harsh line.
Yeah, but that's just misogynistic idiots.
Yes. Welcome.
So I've got absolutely...
Welcome to the internet.
Yeah.
So just tell us about your experience. You know, it won't be quite as bad as Vince McMahon yelling in your ear every sort of 10 seconds. But what is it like?
Is Peter Willis screaming in your ear?
Orders pizza. Orders pizza. He likes a good Hawaiian, does Peter? But I digress. That's an entirely different subject and totally not what you asked me.
So what is it like? Like, how do you balance that? Because it strikes me, if I was trying to present this and someone was yelling at me that I need to mention something else, I genuinely could not do my job. I'd fall to pieces. But what is that like?
Strange. Would sum it up. I'm going to say, first and foremost, I feel really lucky to have started working with Dave Bradshaw because he was so patient. When I started doing commentary, I came from being at ringside as a manager where it was all about being loud and aggressive and self-promotion. Commentary is nothing like that. And that's after my very first show, Dave pulled me aside and said, that was good fun, but it wasn't commentary.
That was intense.
Yeah, because pretty much for about 3-4 hours, I was cutting a promo. And he said to me, we're not cutting promos here. And he was very nice to me, but also very firm. He did also say, if you've got any questions, ask them now. I'll answer anything you have. And he did. And he really guided me through. And slowly but surely, we built up some chemistry together where I could still be that argumentative dickhead, but I could rein it in and not intrude on, the big spots or when he had to tell the story. Really, I wasn't just being a heel for the sake of it. So I feel really lucky that I worked with him. In terms of someone shouting in your ear, it can be quite off-putting, but that's the way it is, and I can only imagine, again, in WWE, I would imagine Vince McMahon shouting in your ear is one of the most intense experiences you could ever have, and it must be so pressurized because you not only have to listen to what the person next to you is saying and feel what's happening in the ring, but if I don't say that, I'm going to get, booted in the whatever. So I was going to say bollocks. That doesn't apply to Renee Young. But, in WWE, I think it's such a pressurized thing. For me personally, we're a bit more laid back, I think. It's the same in ICW as well. It's more kind of old school, kind of just let them do their own thing. Occasionally they will chime in.
Yeah, what are they saying, for example, in your ear?
Really just like, if they feel you're going off base in terms of the story they want to tell in the match, they will kind of like pull you back around, don't forget to say this, blah, blah, blah. Occasionally they will update you on things, because things happen throughout the show naturally that you're not privy to because you're out there for the whole show. So someone might have like changed a finish. And generally we ask not to know the finishes because I quite like that. I like being surprised. Yeah. But if they've got like a new move they want to get over and they've just come up with it, which happens alarmingly a lot in wrestling. Wrestlers, stop it. Come and find us and tell us. Stop bloody thinking we can just guess. Anyway, again, I'm sorry. I'm using this as a platform to vent at poor professional wrestlers.
Cutting promos? They told you not to do that.
I'm sorry. I've never mind. But anyway, if they change something about their act, like they're going to have like a new finisher name or something, they'll tell us something like that. By the way, it's now called such and such, because they want it to be as up to date as possible. But by and large, certainly in ICW, they kind of opt out. In Defiant, Peter's very good at bringing us back in with the stories and don't forget to say this. And because a lot of it when we do Loaded and things, it's episodic. So he'll remind you, you've already seen this and this with this story. You haven't seen this yet, even though we've just recorded that.
Yeah,
so
it strikes me when I used to work there, we used to do things and it'd be like, okay, so we're shooting episodes 4 and 5 today, then 2 and 3 tomorrow. And I don't know how you guys keep on top of all stuff.
It's Dave Bradshaw. Like, I have no problem saying that he is one of the most prepared professional guys I've ever worked with. I honestly don't think I would have got to the stage where I was doing other promotions if I hadn't have started with Dave. I can't. He's going to think that that I love him or something. I don't love you, Dave. I hate your guts. But again, digressing. He is one of the most professional guys I've ever worked with. And if it wasn't for his guidance and his help and his professionalism, I'm not sure I would. I think I would still be doing commentary because I've always been interested in it. Maybe don't think I'd have went to another level and started doing other promotions.
So we talked about you in Defiant. We talked about ICW and other independent promotions. A lot of people sit there and look at WWE and say that is one of the big issues, let's say. So with this new promotion, All Elite Wrestling coming along, you would assume that's one of the first things they're going to tick off alongside, talent, etc., etc. And yet they've kind of stumbled away through initially, haven't they?
Yeah, I mean, for me, one of the big selling points of AEW is the diversity of the in-ring product. And I think they've tried to apply that mentality to commentary, trying to bridge a gap between old school and new with Excalibur and Jim Ross. And even though they have developed a kind of a camaraderie and chemistry that does bleed through, Jim Ross, for me, isn't willing to really sink his teeth into that particular product. It feels like he's a man of a certain taste. Wrestling hit its peak of logic a long time ago for him, and he can't really get on board, and it's causing quite a few miscommunication issues. And in terms of Alex Marvez, I've said this before, I feel so bad criticising him because I can see evidently a guy looking terrified, and I feel so sorry for him, but he's just not cut out for it.
I haven't heard a single person say anything other than that. Like they wish him well. You know, they can tell he's got talent in other areas, and yet he just seems to drag the product down. And it sort of leads me into my next question, I suppose, because we were talking about this beforehand, in fact, because one would assume that you'd look at WWE and say, well, there's all these issues with what they've got. We're going to present an alternative, option for fans. So why not just have a two-man booth? You work in a two-man booth. And how is it different, and should other companies adopt that?
Personally, I can't imagine doing three permanently. I've done it occasionally. For example, we had Joe Hendry join us for 2 shows, and he was second to none.
I think it differs, doesn't it, when you have... Joe's obviously a wrestler. I can't remember if he was wrestling at the time then or whether he was taking time off. Yeah. But it's kind of different when you have an extra, when you have like a Kevin Owens or an Alexa Bliss joining them. That's one thing. But there's a difference, isn't it? It's for small periods, like you say there, it's bearable. But everyone surely must feel they have to try and get all of their stuff in.
Yeah, well, that's what it is. And also, you're very wary of, because with Dave and myself, he plays a straight play-by-play. I'm the colour, obviously. So we have built up this kind of relationship wherein I kind of know what he's going to say before he says it, and vice versa. And it's a good place to be in because then you're not stepping on anyone's toes. If you throw a third party into there, I remember, like, even with Joe, even though he was absolutely brilliant, and I'm sure he really enjoyed it, he said he did anyway, he would probably have rather wrestled, but it was a nice kind of, side project, if you like. I found myself I didn't know how much he was going to have to say. So I found myself kind of laying out a little bit more than I would normally because I didn't want to gobble up all the points and stuff like that. I didn't want to, because that's in my nature, just to, Dave lets me run with it. He just says, go for it. Just, I'll cut you off if I need to. I didn't want to steal anything from anyone. I certainly didn't want there to be a situation where Joe or anyone else that is joining us is sitting there, I have nothing to say here. I don't know how to elaborate on your point. I don't know what to add or anything. So it is difficult. It's very difficult. And I can only imagine what it's like when you've got that three-man dynamic or three-person dynamic permanently. I think it'd be really, really difficult. And again, with AEW, same as WWE, I think they're in a really tough spot there because Jim Ross is such an established name. Fans expect a certain thing from him. Excalibur has been excellent, and Jim Ross has went on record as saying he really enjoys working with him. Then you've got that third wheel again, and that's, again, a very tough spot to be in. And I get the feeling after the first couple of shows, fans have already made their mind up about Marvez, and it's kind of, he's in a rough spot there.
Arguably, the show that really gets credit for having a three-man booth is NXT, really. It strikes me as a fan that, like you say, you have play-by-play, colour, and then that's it. Everything's kind of covered off, isn't it?
And then, no.
It's just, it's like, it's needless to have this third person.
Yeah, absolutely. The only time a three-man booth has ever worked is on Get the Table.
Yes, indeed.
Other than that, I mean,
play-by-play, face, heel. It's really simple.
Here's a pop quiz, right? Can you remember literally anything at all that Percy Watson has ever said? I think of all the great commentary calls throughout history. Like Jerry Lawler's talk about puppies, Jim Ross's like really melodramatic calls of like mankind getting thrown off all that kind of stuff's unforgettable. Name one thing that Percy Watson's ever said. Go.
Oh, the only thing I can remember, and this is an indictment.
Other than that,
an indictment of this is I'm fairly certain. Marinello. You know how much of a fan Marinello I am. Yeah, I know. But his want is to go off on these tangents and say, this is like something out of a video game or
here's
whatever.
all the things I've carefully pre-planned. Let's do it, whether they're good or not. Mauro Ranallo.
My only memory is him saying something like, "This is straight out of a video game," and about a minute later, Percy Watson like, "Well, it's like you're playing some sort of computer game or something." And Ronaldo's like, "Yep, I just said that."
Yep.
Yeah, I don't understand the role the third person is supposed to play, aside from, and this is not to lessen Renee's role, but it kind of feels like a token gesture to like, look, we've got a woman on the panel.
Can I put over a good third wheel commentator? Chris Charlton in New Japan Pro Wrestling is absolutely superb because he knows that he's not a commentator by trade. He's there to offer translations, which really helps bridge the gap, because if you look at the New Japan YouTube channel, John Moxley's interviews post-match are like dwarfing everybody else's. But Chris Charlton's that bridge to get the translations from the Japanese natives over, which is really good. Otherwise, all he does is give really studious backstories to the backgrounds of the pro wrestlers involved, their interactions with their opponents, and then after that, he's out of there for about 5 minutes. 5 minutes allowing Kevin Kelly and Rocky Romero, who's also exceptional, to do their thing. It's the only time I can vaguely remember it working at all.
I'm reaching into dangerous territory here, but my mind shifts to another sport with a three-man booth, which is, of course, UFC. You have your play-by-play, you have John Anik, you have Joe Rogan, and then you have an extra person. That could be Daniel Cormier, it could be Paul Felder. It strikes me that they all play a role there. Like you say, you have play-by-play colour, and then you kind of have the sort of experienced voice, akin to having a wrestler in the booth there. Is that a way that they could possibly go in future? Maybe someone who's, when they like had Punk for a while, for example, someone who's injured or someone who's taking time off, who can just, really guide the audience into what someone is going through in the ring.
Something I think that they should certainly think of for Raw, and maybe in particular because it's 3 hours, is it's something that Eric Bischoff said about Nitro years ago. He liked to have different announce teams. He liked to do it for every hour. Maybe not for every hour in Raw, but remember a while ago when they were doing this, it was fairly recently, they started presenting the final hour differently again.
I would
like to
that
see...
lasted long, didn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's over now. But I would like to see them maybe introduce a different third voice. If they want to keep the three-man or three-person dynamic, introduce a different voice into it, because I get the feeling that, and I know firsthand from doing long shows, that you do feel like you're repeating yourself and you become self-aware of, are people bored of my voice? It's the strangest feeling ever, because certainly with myself, I'm projecting this character and it's 99% heel, and in the back of your mind there's that 1% where you're like, change it up, change it up, change it up. Certainly when you get into like 3-4 hours deep into a show. So for WWE and specifically on Raw, I would like to see them, to your point, maybe if someone is injured or someone like that, not everyone's going to be able to do it.
No.
But someone like The Miz, for example, would be a great example. They do it occasionally with New Day on SmackDown, where they have their pancake announce table. That's not called that, but it should be.
Yes.
They have that, and that kind of mixes things up for me, because it just offers a different voice and a fresh kind of perspective as well. It's not always a commentator's perspective, it's just a different voice.
Right, moving on, because I think we've fairly obviously said there that they probably should shift back to a two-man booth. Final one, when you talk about, we mentioned him at the start, Michael Cole. Is Michael Cole any good? He clearly is a talented person. You wouldn't be in that job for that long. And to balance what he does, as we mentioned, with Vince McMahon yelling in his ear for so many years is fascinating. But is Michael Cole any good?
He's very slick, which I think often gets confused for being good. I don't think I've ever heard Michael Cole say anything that's particularly insightful, that has added depth. He's sometimes good when he's not completely checked out at, like, emulating emotion. In the heat of the moment, when he's bang into it, like, he's not that bad. And I know he's directed, but for me, he's just more slick than he ever was good. And I think that's why they love him so much, because the irony of WWE commentary for me, why they love Michael Cole so much, is that it's this weird and ironic pursuit of like slick perfection. There can't be mistakes. Every single story beat must be hit. And it just creates this artificial feeling that, for me personally, is really distracting. So Michael Cole is slick. What do you think?
Well, like, from a commentator's perspective or a colour man's perspective, that slickness is admirable. But I do take your point about, if it's so slick that it's watertight. Like, because personally, some of the best commentary I feel I've ever done is after I've made a complete hash of it. You know, and Dave will, or whoever I'm working with will pick up on that, and there's a natural conversation that happens, and that's something I've tried to, even as a over-the-top, silly jacket wearing, sunglasses indoors, George Michael wannabe heel, you know, like, I try and come across as much as I can, which is sometimes impossible. I try and come across as a real person who's having a real conversation. I think that's a big problem with wrestling as a whole. Hopefully it's something they're going to fix with backstage promos as well as commentary, by the way. This kind of disingenuous, people not actually talking to each other, they're just saying words type of thing. And with Michael Cole, he has perfected the art of WWE commentary to like, it's just, he is so slick. One thing I would say, when you go back and you look at the commentary he's done for, say, the NXT UK thing, or not, it wasn't NXT UK, it was the United Kingdom tournament with Nigel McGuinness. You could tell he was turned on by that. You know,
the reins were a bit more off, weren't they?
Yeah, he loved that. And I think he's a really good play-by-play man. I really do. It is always interesting that your point is 100% valid about the slickness. But from someone who does commentary a lot, I admire that, because it's something to strive towards. Whether or not it's too slick, maybe, but you know, I think he's very good. And as you said, he's been in the job for so long, and you don't survive, you know, unless he's obviously does something that Vince McMahon loves, and whether or not wrestling fans love that is another topic altogether.
To bring us back to the topic from the beginning then, in terms of fixing it, for me, I'd just like to see more emotion brought back into it. It strikes me as what you mentioned there with the slickness and the smoothness which they do these transitions. The emotion it never comes across for me that people are shocked, angry, happy, sad, whatever. It's all very flat line for me.
Yeah, absolutely, but that's consistent with the way WWE produces things, and commentary seems to be a byproduct of it. It's this, again, an ironic pursuit of perfection, which can only alienate people from what wrestling should be. This, I know it's predetermined, obviously, but it exists to be this spontaneous, live thing that is vital and real and organic. And yeah, we're a long, long way past that.
How else can they fix it?
Just get rid of Vince is the absolute answer to everything that I've ever thought of.
Any other reasonings that we can bring?
Hire me and put me on commentary. No, that's not. No.
Let us know your thoughts on this in the comments section below, or on Twitter at WhatCulture WWE. In fact, watch there. Follow all three of us. You can follow Michael Sidgwick on Twitter at
Sidgwick.
You can follow Jamie Kennedy at.
You can get me at Top Class Kennedy. Don't laugh at the Twitter handle.
You can follow me at Adam Wilbourn. And said you can follow us all at WhatCulture WWE, and make sure you subscribe to What Culture Wrestling on either iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts from for daily wrestling podcasts. My thanks to Michael and to Jamie. Thank you for watching, and we will see you soon.
Drop.